right, let's dive right in.
Sounds good to me.
Today, we're looking at something pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah.
The Free Democratic Party of Germany's platform
Okay.
for the 2025 federal election.
FDP.
Yeah, the FDP.
Okay.
They even have a slogan for it, Alles lässt sich ändern,
Oh,
which basically translates to everything can be changed.
That's a bold statement.
Pretty ambitious, right?
Yeah, it is. And, I think understanding their stance is really important because as a liberal political party in Germany, their ideas could really shake things up.
Yeah.
Especially if they gain more power in the upcoming election.
Exactly. Think of this as like a sneak peek into what they might do if they get their way.
Right.
So no biased opinions here.
Of course.
Just trying to figure out what they're all about.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's start with the FDP's assessment of the current situation in Germany.
Okay.
They're painting a pretty stark picture.
Yeah.
Talking about economic worries.
Right.
Anxiety about the future, and even challenges to security, both inside and outside the country.
Yeah.
They also bring up uncontrolled migration and a society that's becoming increasingly divided.
Yes.
So basically they're saying Germany needs a change, of course.
Yeah, they are. And it's interesting. They see themselves as the champions to lead that change.
Okay.
And they are really big on individual freedom as being the key to unlocking Germany's potential.
Interesting.
It's interesting how they use those historical examples to really hammer home that point.
Right.
Like Germany bouncing back after World War II.
Yeah.
Or the fall of the Berlin Wall in '89.
It's a bold move for sure.
It is, and they're claiming that, these instances demonstrate the power of embracing change.
Do you buy it?
Well, I think, every situation has its own unique context, right?
Of course, yeah.
So it's always important to be critical of these comparisons and not just accept them at face value.
Right, okay. So they've set the stage with their view of Germany's problems and their solution, change. Let's get into specifics.
Sure.
Starting with education.
Right.
They call for world-class education for everyone, which sounds great. But what does that actually mean in practice?
Well, they want to start early by focusing on early childhood education.
Okay.
They're proposing nationwide quality standards for childcare facilities,
Gotcha.
which they call kitas.
Kitas.
Yeah, this would include things like having enough teachers per child,
Okay.
less paperwork for educators,
Okay.
and even bringing in specialists from different fields to work with the kids.
Wow. So starting early is real.
Yeah, and then they also want to introduce mandatory language tests in preschool
Okay.
to make sure every kid has a good grasp of German
Before they start school.
before they start school.
Wow.
Yeah, they really want to make sure everyone has a solid foundation from
Yeah.
the very beginning.
It sounds like a pretty big task.
It is a pretty big task, but it doesn't stop there.
Oh, okay.
They also want to give schools more independence, more autonomy.
Okay.
They call this school freedom.
School freedom.
Yeah, so this would include letting schools control their own budgets
Okay.
and decide how to structure their programs.
Wow.
They even want schools to be able to choose between the G8 and G9 systems.
Which is basically like deciding if kids finish high school in 8 or 9 years, right?
Exactly.
So less top-down control and more power to the schools themselves.
That's the idea.
But do you think it would work?
Well, I think it's certainly a debate worth having.
Yeah.
More autonomy could lead to more innovation and better results.
Right.
But it could also create disparities if some schools are better equipped to handle that freedom than others.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's almost like they want to shake up the entire education system.
Yeah, you could say that. And they don't stop there. They also want to bring education into the digital age,
Oh, how so?
incorporating AI-based learning methods.
AI in the classroom.
Yeah. And they want to create what they call a campus for educational innovation. It would link schools with the tech industry.
That's pretty forward-looking.
It is.
So it's not just about the kids currently in school.
No, they also want to strengthen vocational training
Okay.
and make it easier for people to learn new skills throughout their lives.
So education shouldn't just stop once you leave school.
Exactly.
Ah.
They're even proposing a Life Chances BEFIG.
What's that?
It's financial support to help people upskill and reskill.
So like a BIFOG, but for adults.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so the FDP wants to transform education.
Yes.
But what about their plans for the economy?
Well, they start by acknowledging Germany's inherent economic strengths,
Okay.
but they also say that there are obstacles holding the country back.
Okay.
And their main message is that Germany needs a real economic turnaround
A turnaround.
to avoid falling into pessimism and conflict over resources.
Okay.
They believe the answer lies in boosting growth and creating a better environment for businesses.
So less government intervention and more free market.
That seems to be the gist of it, yeah.
Okay, so how do they plan to do that?
Well, they're proposing some pretty drastic measures.
Okay.
First, they want a 3-year break from any new regulations.
Wow.
That would give businesses some breathing room.
Okay.
Then they want a bureaucracy-free year where companies don't have to file certain reports.
Interesting.
And to top it off, they even want to put sunset clauses on laws.
Sunset clauses meaning?
Meaning they would expire automatically unless they're actively renewed.
Wow, that's a lot of deregulation.
It is.
What else?
They're also big on tax cuts.
Okay.
They want to simplify the income tax system with what they call a linear progressive opportunity tax rate.
Okay.
And then they want to get rid of the Solidaritätszuschlag.
That's the tax that was originally meant to help pay for German reunification.
That's the one.
Yeah.
But they now see it as an unnecessary burden on the middle class.
Okay.
And to top it all off,
There's more.
they want to lower corporate tax rates to below 25%.
Wow, they really are going all in on those tax cuts.
They are.
But do you think it would actually stimulate the economy, or would it just benefit the wealthy?
Well, it's a complex issue.
Right.
There are arguments on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
The supporters of tax cuts
Yeah.
argue that they put more money in people's pockets,
Yeah.
encourage investment,
Yeah.
which leads to economic growth.
I see.
That benefits everyone.
Okay.
But critics argue that tax cuts often mainly benefit the wealthy
Right.
and can lead to cuts in essential public services.
Yeah, if the government loses that revenue,
Exactly.
it's all about finding the right balance.
It is.
Making sure that those benefits are spread fairly.
Exactly.
It's never as simple as cut taxes good or raise taxes bad.
Right.
So what else is in their economic plan?
Well, they also want to transform Germany from a nation of savers to a nation of shareholders.
Interesting.
So they're proposing things like a national financial literacy strategy,
Okay.
tax incentives for long-term investments, and policies to encourage more venture capital.
Look, you want to get more people investing in the stock market.
Yeah, and taking ownership in companies.
That's quite a shift from that traditional German emphasis on saving.
It is.
I wonder how that would play out.
Yeah, especially for people who might be unfamiliar with the risks of investing.
Exactly.
It would definitely require a significant effort to educate people
Yeah.
about financial markets and potential downsides.
Okay, so they've laid out this bold vision for education and a pretty radical plan to shake up the economy.
They have.
But there's still a lot more to unpack.
There is.
What's next on their agenda?
Well, they have some pretty strong opinions on energy policy.
Okay.
And their stance might surprise you, especially considering Germany's recent history with nuclear power.
Sounds intriguing, but we'll have to save that for part 2.
We will. Welcome back.
All right, so last time we left off with the FDP's plans for education and the economy.
Yeah.
But now we're getting into some territory that's sure to spark some heated debates. Their vision for energy policy.
It's a big one.
And it seems like they're not afraid to shy away from controversy, are they?
Not at all.
They're tackling one of the most sensitive topics in German politics head-on,
Which is
nuclear power.
Right.
Remember, Germany has been phasing out nuclear energy
Yeah.
with plans to shut down all the remaining plants by the end of this year,
Right.
but the FDP is proposing a complete U-turn.
A U-turn? How so?
They want to allow the construction of new next-generation nuclear power plants.
Oh.
And they even want to give operators the option to restart the plants that are scheduled to be closed.
That's a pretty radical departure from the current path.
Yeah, I imagine that's causing quite a stir, considering how strong the anti-nuclear sentiment is in Germany.
It is. It is.
So what's their reasoning behind this?
Well, they argue that nuclear power is a safe and reliable source of energy, which can help Germany meet its climate goals, especially as it transitions away from fossil fuels.
Yeah.
They also point to the rising cost of energy and the need to reduce dependence on imports, particularly from Russia.
So it's a matter of energy security as well.
Exactly.
But what about the safety concerns?
Yeah.
And the issue of nuclear waste disposal?
Right.
Those are pretty big hurdles to overcome.
They are, and the FDP acknowledges these concerns.
Okay.
They argue that modern nuclear technology is much safer and more efficient
Okay.
than older reactors,
Okay.
and they believe that the risks of accidents are minimal.
Okay.
As for nuclear waste, they support research into new disposal methods
Okay.
and believe that a long-term solution can be found.
It sounds like they're trying to present a more optimistic and forward-looking view of nuclear energy.
They are.
In contrast to kind of like the anxieties and fears that have shaped public opinion for so long.
I think that's right.
But do you think they have a chance of actually swaying public opinion on this?
It's tough to say.
Especially with the memory of events like Fukushima still relatively fresh in people's minds.
It's a big challenge for sure.
Public opinion on nuclear power is so complex. It
It is.
deeply rooted in those historical events and cultural values.
Absolutely.
But this stance from the FDP, it reflects a willingness to challenge conventional thinking,
It does.
advocate for what they see as the best path forward.
Yeah,
So the FDP is stirring the pot with their stance on nuclear power.
they are.
But what about their broader energy policy?
Well, their approach seems to be based on pragmatism
Okay.
and affordability.
Okay.
They want to make energy cheaper for individuals and businesses,
Okay.
and they're targeting some specific areas to achieve that.
Like it.
One of their key proposals is to lower the electricity tax
Okay.
to the minimum level allowed by the EU with
Okay.
the goal of abolishing it entirely.
Wow. So a direct way to reduce people's energy bills?
Exactly.
That would be popular.
It would be very popular.
But wouldn't it also mean less revenue for the government?
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
It would depend on how they plan to offset that lost revenue.
Through spending cuts,
Yeah,
increasing taxes elsewhere.
potentially, yeah.
There are always trade-offs to consider.
There are. What else are they targeting?
They also want to phase out the minimum EU tax rates
Uh-huh.
on heating and motor fuels,
right.
especially as CO2 pricing becomes more widespread.
So their argument is that relying on these market-based mechanisms like carbon pricing
Yeah.
is a more efficient way to reduce emissions than just imposing taxes on specific fuels.
Exactly.
So they're saying, let the market decide
Help the market decide.
which energy sources are the most cost-effective and environmentally friendly.
Exactly.
But does that really work in practice?
Well, it's a complex issue.
Right.
There are legitimate concerns
Yeah.
about the impact of these market-based approaches
Yeah.
on vulnerable populations.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So the FDP would need to make sure that their policies don't disproportionately harm
Low-income households.
low-income households or those who are heavily reliant on fossil fuels.
It's a tough balancing act, trying to find that sweet spot between affordability.
Environmental sustainability and social equity,
Mm-hmm.
not an easy task.
Not at all.
And it doesn't stop there, their energy policy.
It doesn't.
They also want to overhaul the system of grid fees.
Okay.
Those are the charges that consumers pay to fund the development and maintenance of the electricity grid, right?
That's right.
They argue that these fees are just too high
Mm-hmm.
and can be reduced through digitization, dynamic pricing, and more efficient grid expansion. So basically modernize the grid,
Yeah.
make it more efficient, which they believe will lead to lower costs for consumers.
That's the idea.
It sounds like a reasonable goal,
It does.
but is it realistic?
Well, grid modernization is a complex and expensive undertaking.
It is.
So it would require significant investment and coordination across different levels of government and the private sector.
It would, yeah.
So it's a long-term project
Right.
with potential benefits, but also with challenges and risks.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so they have a lot of ideas about how to make energy cheaper and more efficient. But what about renewable energy?
Yeah.
Germany has been a leader in that area for a while now.
Right.
So I'm curious to hear where the FDP stands on that.
Well, they are definitely supportive of renewable energy,
Okay.
but they want to change how it's integrated into the market.
Okay.
So they want to phase out subsidies
Cool.
for renewables
Wow.
and let them compete on a level playing field with other energy sources
Right.
like fossil fuels and nuclear power.
So a more market-driven approach.
Exactly.
They believe that removing those subsidies will make the industry more efficient and innovative.
That's what they say.
But couldn't it also slow down the transition to renewables?
It's a possibility.
If they can't compete with cheaper fossil fuels,
It could.
the FDP would need to carefully consider that,
They would?
the potential impact of this policy shift.
Right.
Okay, so the FDP's energy policy is a mix of bold moves and controversial proposals,
It is.
from embracing nuclear power to overhauling the electricity grid. They're not afraid to shake things up. But what about their vision for Social Security?
That's another interesting area.
Yeah, I hear they have some pretty strong opinions there, too.
They do. Their stance on Social Security is actually one of the most controversial aspects of their platform.
How so?
Well, they want to reform the system.
Okay.
They argue that it's too focused on providing a safety net.
Right.
And not enough on incentivizing work.
Okay.
They believe that work should always be more rewarding than receiving benefits.
Okay.
And they're proposing some significant changes.
So they want to reform the system. What does that actually mean in practice?
Good question.
What are they actually proposing?
Well, one of their key targets is the Bürgergeld,
Okay.
which is Germany's basic income scheme.
Yeah, that's designed to provide a safety net for people who are unemployed or have low incomes, right?
Right.
But the FDP argues that it's become too much of a handout and that it doesn't do enough to encourage people to find work, so they see it as a disincentive to work.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's a pretty harsh assessment.
It is.
Do you think it's accurate?
Well, it's a complex issue.
Is
There's no easy answer. There's always a risk with any social safety net
Yeah,
that it can create a disincentive to work if it's not designed carefully.
of course.
But there's also the risk that making the system too harsh
Yeah.
can just push people into poverty,
Right.
create more problems than it solves.
Right. It's about finding the right balance.
Exactly.
So what specific changes are they proposing?
Well, one of their key proposals is to introduce what they call an intensive phase
Not intensive phase.
at the beginning of benefit receipt.
Okay.
This means that people who start receiving Bürgergeld would have to be in frequent contact with job centers
Okay.
and actively search for work.
So more pressure to find a job quickly.
Yeah, they're trying to make the system less passive,
Okay.
more focused on getting people back into the workforce as soon as possible.
But what about people who face barriers to employment,
Right.
like lack of childcare or transportation?
That's a crucial question.
Would those be taken into account?
The FDP would need to make sure that their policies don't unfairly penalize people
Yeah.
who are genuinely trying to find work,
Right.
but face these legitimate obstacles. They
Okay.
would need to provide adequate support and resources
To help people overcome those barriers.
to help people overcome those barriers.
It sounds like there's a lot of room for debate
There is.
about how to implement these reforms in a way that's both fair and effective.
Absolutely. It's a complex issue
Yeah.
with no easy solutions.
Right.
And the FDP's proposals are definitely going to spark some strong reactions
Yeah.
from both sides of the political spectrum.
Okay, so they're shaking things up with their energy policy,
Yeah.
proposing some pretty controversial changes to Social Security.
They are.
But what else is on their agenda?
Well, they're known for their strong emphasis on individual freedom,
Right.
and I'm curious to see what that translates into in terms of their policies.
Yeah, it's a big topic.
It is, but we'll have to save that for part 3 of our deep dive.
Sounds good. Welcome back to the deep dive. Feels like we've already covered a whole semester's worth of political science.
It does feel that way.
We've talked about the FDP's ideas for education, the economy, and even their controversial energy policies.
It's been long.
But there's one more big piece we need to explore:
Which is?
their stance on individual freedom.
Yes, you're right.
They talk a lot about it.
They do. It really is a core part of their platform.
Yeah, it touches on so many aspects of life in Germany.
It does.
Their vision for the role of the state,
Yeah.
personal choices, even how they see Germany's place in the world.
It's like a thread that connects all their ideas.
So where do we even begin to unpack all of this?
Well, a good place to start, I think, is their approach to social issues.
Okay.
They're really big on fighting discrimination against marginalized groups
Okay.
and pushing for a more modern understanding of family structures.
So they want to make sure everyone has equal opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of their background.
Exactly.
Those are their beliefs.
Yeah, and they're really strong advocates for self-determination,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to things like healthcare
Mhm.
or end-of-life choices.
So giving individuals more control over their own lives.
Exactly.
Okay. What else?
Well, they are also, really vocal about protecting freedom of speech
Okay.
and the press, both online and offline.
They see that as essential for a healthy democracy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, on a different note, they've also talked about combating extremism.
Yeah, they're particularly concerned, I think, about the threat of Islamism.
Okay.
They want to make sure that Germany remains a safe and welcoming place for everyone.
Especially Jewish citizens.
Yeah, who have unfortunately faced a rise in anti-Semitism in recent years.
That's a tough one.
It is.
Balancing those individual freedoms with the need to protect against those who would exploit those freedoms.
It's an ongoing debate in democracies all over the world.
It is for sure. So we talked about social issues. But what about their vision for the role of the state?
Well, they have a really strong belief in limited government and fiscal responsibility.
So less intervention, more individual freedom.
You could say that, yeah.
And they're adamant about sticking to the Schuldenbremse,
which is
Germany's constitutional debt brake.
Right. They see that as a crucial way to ensure sustainable public finances.
So they're basically saying no to racking up huge debts that our kids and grandkids will have to pay off.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and they're also opposed to any kind of debt mutualization at the EU level.
Oh, interesting.
Beyond the one-time Next Generation EU fund that was created in response to the pandemic.
So each country kind of taking responsibility for its own finances.
That's their stance, yeah.
So we've covered their views on individual freedom in society.
Right.
And their preference for a smaller, more efficient state.
Yes.
But I'm curious about their vision for Germany's role in the world.
Well, it's interesting. They seem to be straddling both sides a little bit.
Yeah.
On the one hand, they're very much in favor of free trade, globalization. They see Germany as a strong and competitive player in the global economy.
Okay, makes sense.
But then on the other hand,
yeah,
they're also quite skeptical of deeper European integration.
Particularly when it comes to things like fiscal policy.
Yeah, fiscal policy and migration.
So it's kind of a mixed bag.
It is. They want the benefits of globalization and European cooperation, but without giving up too much sovereignty.
Or control over their own destiny.
Exactly.
It's a balancing act for sure.
It is. It reflects, I think, a broader trend that we see in German politics.
This idea of being open to the world, but also protecting national interests.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the FDP wants more individual freedom, a smaller state, and they have this kind of ambivalent view of Germany's place in the world.
Yeah, it's a complex picture.
It is, and it's important to remember that this is just one party's vision.
Right.
The reality is probably going to be a lot more messy and unpredictable.
Oh, absolutely. There are so many other factors at play.
Yeah, public opinion, global events, who knows what's going to happen in 4 years.
Exactly.
But this deep dive has given us a really good insight into what the FDP stands for.
It has.
And where they might try to steer Germany if they get the chance.
I agree, and it's a reminder that even in a complex world, ideas really do matter.
They do. They shape our future, whether we realize it or not.
That's right.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the FDP's platform, what do you think?
Yeah.
Does their vision for Germany resonate with you?
Good question.
What hopes or concerns do their proposals raise for you?
These are definitely questions worth thinking about.
Yeah, and remember, the exploration doesn't end here.
Absolutely not.
Keep asking questions, keep digging deeper, and keep challenging your own assumptions.
That's the key.
That's it for our deep dive into the FDP's vision for Germany's future.
It was a fascinating journey.
We'll be back soon with another interesting topic to explore.
We will.
Until then, keep those brains buzzing.
Until next time.